Hello, my name is Srinivas Eluripati. I'm based out of Hyderabad, India. As part of the MIT Postgraduate Certificate Program in Cybersecurity, I would like to present my Capstone project. The problem definition for the project is to analyze the Equifax data breach that happened in the year 2017. Let me start with some background about the root cause for the data breach. The Apache Struts 2.x version vulnerability was the main root cause for the data breach. This vulnerability comes with an incorrect exception handling and error message generating file uploads attempts. And this would allow the remote attackers to execute arbitrary commands on the target system. This vulnerability would impact the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of any system that is impacted. So let me start with when this Equifax attack started, and what are the various different nuances within the attack. The struts vulnerability was identified in March 2017. There was a patch released in the same month for the tech world usage, and US CERT has intimated Equifax as well as a lot of other financial organizations, a US organization for that matter, to install the patch and protect their systems. Equifax immediately acted on that, and then they put forth the patch into their systems. However, but by July 29, 2017, Equifax has discovered that the breach has impacted their network, and they started addressing the issue. So by August 2nd, 2017, Equifax has notified FBI, and an external cybersecurity firm was engaged to investigate into the issue. And by late August 2017, Equifax has prepared a system, online portal for the individuals to come and check whether their PI data has been impacted or not using their social security number or account number, something of that sort. The core PA data that got compromised includes areas like first name, last name, social security number, date of birth, address. In some cases, driving license number, and in some cases, bank account number or credit card number. But if you keenly observe this data breach, the attackers entered into Equifax systems by mid March. However, only by July 29th, the Equifax would able to identify that their systems got exploited. So closed about for about 2.5 months, the attackers were there in the system, exploiting the systems, and then copying a lot of data outside of the network. A little more details about the data breach. As soon as the struts vulnerability was announced, many attackers started scanning the web to identify vulnerable servers, and Equifax server was identified as vulnerable, and they started exploiting. So close to about 76 days, they extracted they ran 9,600 plus queries onto the Equifax system, and then on about 51 databases, and extracted huge chunk of PI data. Patching up the vulnerability in the struts framework is definitely a voluminous activity, because unlike a DLL patchup or any other system patchup, the struts patchup would require recompiling the impacted system's code with the new patch that is available. And because it is a very widely used technology, there could be hundreds of applications within the network that may be using the said vulnerability. In the case of Equifax, I try to prepare the high level logical view of the impacted systems. The impacted system name is ACIS. This is a online dispute management portal where a customer can come and log their dispute. And this portal has a system called as visibility appliance, which routes the www request, and there is intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system attached to this system. And the second issue that was observed, right, in the entire Equifax network is that the SSL certificate on the visibility appliance was expired in Jan 2016. It's close to about 14 months prior to the attack. The SSL certificate was expired. However, Equifax could not able to identify that the SSL certificate on such a critical system got expired. So there is a clear failure from the security operations control department visible in this entire case study. The system consists of two web servers, two app servers, and many different databases. So all these systems got impacted. Now, in my mind, I think the biggest failure in the case of Equifax is that the entire defense in depth methodology has been fully failed, right? As I said before, SOC is a big failure. They could not able to identify the certificate expiry for such a critical system, and security operation control would really need to understand or maintain inventory of systems and the hardware, software, certificates that must be expiring. So that's a big failure. Then at the same time, the struts vulnerability implementation, patch implementation was also a big failure. It is a very complex process. There is no evidence that they conducted sufficient penetration testing or ethical hacking to check the validity of the quality of the patching. Then the second issue that I observed, right, as part of the defense in depth is IAM controls are fully failed. And the reason why I feel the IAM controls were fully failed is because the database access for a PAA system should be fully controlled, right? And when the attackers were into the system, they could able to easily access the relevant databases and could able to extract the data from those databases. So there must be many different systems for which the IAM controls were failed. It could be app server logins as well as the web server logins. So the preventive controls are also fully compromised. So preventive control would include hardening the systems or making sure that the multiple subsystem access were not available, and then making sure that the IAM controls are in place, right? All these elements of the preventive controls were failed. Then the fourth issue that I observed is that the logging and monitoring mechanisms were also failed. When the database was queried for about 9,600 times, no way the security controls were able to identify that such a huge set of queries were executed on the database. Similarly, the database segmentation was also not in place. For such a critical system, database segmentation is going to be very important, so that you can isolate in case if any specific database got impacted, isolate rest of the databases and prevent further damage to the system. So a combination of logging mechanisms, data governance mechanisms were completely failed. Network monitoring is another challenge that I observed as part of my analysis. When the attackers were there in the network for about close to 2.5 months, a lot of ingress and egress data transfer was happening. The network monitoring systems could not detect such a voluminous activity for a period of 2.5 months. So which is a big flaw within the security posture of the organization. Communication failure is another big issue. As per the third party forensic report, Equifax SVP has failed to forward the original US cert mail on the structure vulnerability to the respective teams and put enough strategy in place to make sure that the vulnerability is patched up at appropriate time, or I would say immediately. So there is a time lag between this notification from the US cert and the time when Equifax has implemented the patching of the system. So during that time, in my mind, I think the breach has really happened. Similarly, former CEO Richard Smith testified before the Congress, blaming that there is a human error and failure to communicate the need to patch up the system. That's a big gap that I observe. Penetration testing is another area that is a big gap. So whenever patching for such a complex system happens, there should be enough penetration testing strategies applied to make sure that the network is secure, the patched up systems are secure, and make sure that the any known vulnerability is tested. So it's a known vulnerability because as soon as the vulnerability is identified, there's enough documentation available, made public, to make sure that the systems are hardened to avoid any further damage. So I would like to talk about some of the key recommendations to address similar issues and improve the security posture of any organization. The first and foremost element is to focus on the CIA grid, on the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and this is the cornerstone for building a security strategy. Wherever there is a PA data is involved, make sure that the enough controls are in place, enough policies are in place to put sufficient strategy to address the security breaches. Um, from the availability perspective, there are many cybersecurity frameworks available. I recommend NIST framework for the defensive cybersecurity because this gives a comprehensive set of strategies to implement security for an organization. Similarly, if there is a requirement for critical data security, I would recommend strategies around PCI DSS or HIPAA or any other data privacy controls. So I think every organization should really look at what are the available frameworks and which framework really fits for the business requirement, and make sure that it is fully documented as part of the policy. Employees are trained and fully implemented. There must be enough auditing controls in place to make sure that the security strategies are fully implemented. Then the second recommendation that I would like to give is the CISO organization should identify the key areas from the NIST framework and follow all the guidelines and make sure that it's part of the regular fire drills that they do, the security drills that they do on the organization, and implement all the preventive controls. There is no specific order in which I called out the CISO department, but the most important one I would like to start with is the IAM controls. The identity management controls are fully in place, and make sure that define and manage the identities and access controls based on the identities that are required for the systems as well as the network. This would include things like password management, single sign-on, two-factor authentication, etc., etc. Then the second element is make sure that the information assets are completely captured. A catalog of the assets are maintained, and all these assets are categorized based on the PI requirements, and maintain inventory of these assets, so that whenever such a notification of such a attack comes in, use this data to identify the risk areas and do a sufficient risk management and build a plan to address the vulnerability. Then the security operations center also should have the right response strategy, identify the response teams, identify communication plan, put up a service desk, and train and communicate to the technology staff as well as users and all the important players to address the security compliance issues. Last but not the least, the governance, risk, and compliance (GRC) controls are very, very important. This would include define the right security policy, processes and practice, and the policies must include a good set of the offensive security strategies as well, which I would cover in the upcoming slide. One technique that I would like to recommend very strongly is red teaming. Using this technique, any policy, what are the policy that is defined, right, and what are the procedure that is in place, what are the framework is in place, must be questioned and make sure that identify the failure points, critically evaluate the applicability of the set policies, procedures, and controls. We can engage external entity or internal teams can also be part of the red teaming, and make sure that the security policies and practices are questioned regularly and improve the overall security posture of the organization. The third set of recommendations that I would like to provide are the defense in depth strategies. I called out some of the controls as part of the defense in depth implementation. Set of directive controls that would include policies and procedures. Set of preventive controls that would include how do you prevent unauthorized access to the systems, applications, devices, accesses, etc., etc. Then set up directive controls that would include how do you detect the unauthorized access in various different forms, right? And then corrective controls, right? When there is a challenge observed, or when there is a vulnerability observed, how do you mitigate and remediate those findings, right? Now these specific set of security controls need to be thoroughly understood by the cybersecurity teams, as well as the application development, as well as the application owners, and then implement these controls across the organization assets. So some of the organization assets are some of the key focus areas that I identified for implementation of the defense in depth in this slide. For example, if you take endpoint security as a key strategy, identify all the firewalls, VPNs, IDS and IPS systems, data loss prevention strategy, and make sure that there is a policy implemented, control frameworks are implemented. Similarly, if you look at host as a key area, make sure that all the hosts are patched up. There are upgrades are in place. Identify what all should go as an automated upgrade and what all should go as a manual upgrade, and make sure that there's enough examination and risk assessment happening for the host, and make sure that the antivirus signatures are up to date, right? So these are some of the strategies that I would like to recommend as part of the defense in depth implementation. Then the fourth set of the recommendations that I would like to call out are the offensive security strategies. These include areas like ethical hacking, penetration testing, red teaming, which I covered in the previous slide, social engineering training, ensure that all the employees, users, and contractors are enabled on the social engineering attacks, and AML threat intelligence techniques. I strongly recommend the AML threat intelligence techniques because these techniques are very advanced, and they would help you to identify millions of events and logs and scenarios, and map them back to vast variety of the known threats as well as simulated threats, and proactively identify the overall security vulnerabilities, and help the cybersecurity team to remediate them. Some of the references as part of my research I called out on this slide. Um, gao.gov assets I refer to. Then I refer to NIST documentation, the cybersecurity frameworks, as well as some documentation around the struts vulnerability. Additionally, I looked at some of the key blocks that are available from the security websites. I would like to thank the team behind the entire program. Kerry Person, who is a program architect and executive director for the MIT Sloan cybersecurity program. She has given a lot of guidance on the key areas within the cybersecurity, and her sessions have greatly helped improve my learnability, knowledge. In addition, all the professors that guided us in the last 10 months time. In addition, I would like to thank Golam Ajam, uh, who is the office chair and leader from MIT, who helped us in the last 10 to 11 months understand the program objectives and help us deep dive into some of the key topics as part of the webinars. With this, I would like to end my presentation and say goodbye to you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to present the Capstone project. Bye bye.